Hi, everyone. I'm Tyler Dioro, Chief of Staff at ResearchHub, and today I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we're doing and how we're trying to accelerate the pace of scientific research. So, scientific research itself is one of the highest levers that exists in the world today for pushing technological progress. But there's a couple of issues that underpin this entire structure, which reduce its efficiency and essentially make it not so fun to be a researcher at times. And so the biggest one of which is the reproducibility crisis. Nature put out a survey a while back where they asked survey respondents whether there's actually something going on with reproducibility. And 90% of the survey respondents agreed that there is a reproducibility crisis happening. And when they asked researchers to try and reproduce each other's experiments, they saw that more than 70% tried and failed to reproduce these experiments. This has led to about $170 billion every single year being wasted in biomedical research. And if this sounds like a big number, maybe bigger than funding, it's because it is. Essentially, when you have a foundational work that was irreproducible, all of the works downstream of that initial work are potentially wasted if they were based on false data. So this was most notable in the amyloid hypothesis. Essentially, researchers were looking at amyloid beta and saying, this is where disease starts. Surely this must be where we target for pharmaceuticals. When in reality, there's a lot more happening, and amyloid beta might just be a downstream effect of something much, much earlier. So, had we known that that original research wasn't reproducible, we may have chosen a different path and maybe even saved billions of research dollars along the way. And this kind of ties into how grant funding is given out. So right now, grant committees will look at your publication records in order to distribute their money. And so for researchers, this is the number of publications you have, as well as the number of citations, and some average between the two to see how efficient you are. But what this means to the researcher is that you have a financial incentive to optimize your research papers to get more citations and to put out more publications. But the issue here is that a highly cited paper doesn't necessarily mean that it's high quality research. And I think Goodhart's law sums this up really well. It says when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So as humans, we all kind of have an eye on where the goalposts are, and we'll sort of optimize our behaviors such that we most efficiently get to those goalposts. But what can happen is we may forget why those goalposts were placed there in the first place. And so, essentially they may not actually be doing what they're trying to do with these targets because people are sort of gaming the system by necessity. And this is kind of the fundamental idea that Pat Joyce and Brian Armstrong built upon starting in 2019, almost 5 years ago now, where essentially they saw that a lot of these issues that exist in academia are downstream of the incentive structures. So they proposed that maybe some modular incentive structures, possibly with blockchain, could be a way of addressing these fundamental issues that exist in science. So our platform today, it's a modern day preprint server. So you can think of this like an archive preprint server plus live discussion, or similar to a Stack Overflow style platform specifically for scientific research. And we have a couple hundred users today who are kind of active and maintaining the culture where we look for really high rigor content and want to try and stay like sort of a tier above Reddit, more targeted towards this academic audience. And we've built a couple of tools along the way. First of which is the reference manager. So if you're unfamiliar, reference manager is a very fundamental tool as part of the research stack. Essentially, as you're reading papers as a researcher, you'll want to group them into logical bins. So for example, if I'm reading about Alzheimer's disease, I'm going to grab stuff about pharmaceuticals, stuff about vascular degeneration, and stuff about the brain. And I'll coordinate these in my reference manager into one overarching folder that I'll invite my collaborators to and sort of collaborate in real time on publications. Now, typically people use Mendeley or Zotero or EndNote. For us, the sort of benefit of ResearchHub's reference manager is that people can talk about these in public, not just in their private research groups. And additionally, they can earn research coin for the content that they discuss on these PDFs. We also have a built-in lab notebook, but we know people use Microsoft Word as kind of the standard for writing papers. So we built a Microsoft Word plugin as well for this to tie into the workflow. Additionally, we have inline commenting. So on any PDF or publication or preprint, it automatically gets converted to HTML on our site, and people can go in live and discuss papers inline, line by line. So a good example of this was during LK99. Stuff was happening really fast and preprints were coming out. So we had users coming on in real time talking about LK99, magnetic fields, the Meissner effect, and some floating rocks. And so it was great to really see people talk about this live science on the cutting edge right as it was happening. And next, we also do a lot of peer reviews. Peer reviews are one of the backbones. They're sort of like the social consensus layer of research, where essentially peers in your network group or your field will look at your preprint and try and say, hey, does this match the rigor of the field? Does it know where all the other papers are heading, or is there anything it didn't take into account? And so we wanted to lean into this as really high rigor content. So what we do is we automatically port all new bioRxiv preprints into ResearchHub, into its own hub. And certain preprints, if they get enough activity, will automatically have a $150 bounty placed on it by ResearchHub. And we've seen researchers from academia and industry come on to take these peer review bounties. So since we started back in fall, we have almost 500 peer reviews completed on the platform. At $150 each, we've paid out over $75,000 in peer reviews. And the average turnaround time, I believe, has been under a week for most of these, which is really impressive. Typically, peer reviews can take multiple months. I know I've been waiting actually for a couple months for one of mine, which is kind of funny. But we noticed during these peer reviews too that authors tended to talk about their qualifications, saying, hey, I'm qualified in this, but maybe I fall short in this area, so maybe don't trust my opinion perfectly. So we built a workflow where authors can come in, claim the DOIs of their published papers and preprints, and they'll earn a pool of research coin allocated to them depending on the activity. And they'll also get this nice badge to show a distinction on the platform, basically saying, hey, I am a verified published author. And what we've been kind of building towards is this funding feature. So in this first round that we went live with, we asked people for a couple 100-word application. And then we narrowed it down to 6 applicants who put their pre-registrations live for crowdfunding for $5,000 each. And all 6 of these pre-registrations were funded also in under a week. Really, really fast turnaround time for a grant. And so to take a look at who these people were, they're really hardcore scientists doing really hardcore work. We have a postdoc from Harvard looking at magnetic resonance spectroscopy, a budding professor looking at open source alpha mysense data, an MD PhD student looking at multiple myeloma, a PhD student at Purdue looking at blood-brain barrier uptake, a postdoc at Donders Institute looking at active steering and some of the ways we perceive steering, and then a postdoc pursuing an independent project building an open source tool for neuroimaging research. So these pre-registrations, this is a glimpse into Grigori's pre-registration. They can be very intense, and that's sort of their purpose, is to give everybody a very big feel for why you're doing this research, how you'll do it, what you expect to get, and how you'll expect to analyze the results you get, as well as the budget. And the purpose here is, sure, in the open, you'll get, good feedback and improve your research, but also it gives really important context and alternate sort of discussion around your work for the broader audience, so that when your publication ultimately does come out, this extra information has been shown in pre-registrations to increase the reproducibility of that downstream research. So it's really important. And in the process, we had people come on, give peer reviews, and actually iterate with the authors and improve their suggested studies. And a really cool example is Mark Handley, one of the awardees, came on and asked for some help with a bounty on ResearchHub, where he said, hey, I'm not so great at R code, or I could use some help with this specific task. Can somebody come on and help me? And a developer came on within 24 hours, wrote the code for him, gave him the code, and explained it sort of line by line about why it's the right approach. So really, really fast turnaround that could have taken him weeks of research time otherwise. Our next round of research funding is going to go live on April 1st, where we'll launch with these 3 applicants: a postdoc, Matthew Bruce at University of Maryland, postdoc in industry looking at extracellular matrix aging, and a PhD student, Brendan Ball, looking at Alzheimer's and type 2 diabetes. Then additionally, on April 15th, we're really happy to say we're going to have three more coming out, this time curated by AthenaDAO in the realm of women's health. So a big thank you to them, and keep your eye out for April 15th when they'll announce who these individuals are. And thank you again to them for funding about half of the funds going towards this. So just to close, we're a really small team of builders trying to accelerate the pace of science, and we'd love to connect with anybody who has strong opinions or strong interests. So feel free to connect with us, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Really excited to see people kind of come in.